현재 전보서도 님미장 오늘 모놈 전보는 야다 바크라다 용산도 실말도 돈바 되지 잔라 기숑서 내셔널 생이 정감서 자워 뒤지션노에라 유메 반조자라 소란데 공주도 반보를 신지로
To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Now let us continue our study of the Bodhicharyavatara, ocean of good explanations. Previously we discussed the harm caused by afflictions. We should not become weary of antidoting afflictions by remembering our own commitments. At the same time, we should make the vow to persistently overcome our own afflictions. Right now, we are studying this section, and in the root verses it is stated, "It would be better to be slain by being burnt or decapitated. In no way shall I ever bow before my enemy, the afflictions." The literal meaning of this verse is quite straightforward. It means that I would rather endure extremely intense suffering, such as being burned in blazing fire, or even having my head cut off by others. None of this would matter to me. Even if my body were to be consumed by flames, that would be acceptable. And if, in the process of battling afflictions, my entire body were to be cut into pieces until nothing remained, even reaching such an extreme would be acceptable. But since it is extremely rare for us to encounter the authentic Dharma in this lifetime, we must fight against afflictions and never bow before them. We must overcome them and achieve victory. I must never yield or bow before afflictions nor be swayed by them. As practitioners, we must make such a vow. Whether our practice in daily life is good or not mainly depends on how strong our determination is. If our determination is strong, even if we have done many wrong things in the past and have faced many hardships and uncertainties in life, but now we have met a spiritual teacher and encountered the genuine Dharma, we can start anew. From now on, no matter what kind of affliction arises, whether the root afflictions such as desire, anger, ignorance and jealousy, or the 84,000 armies of afflictions, we are determined to fight against them. And in this battle, we must persevere until we achieve final victory. So, in the world, what we call a hero is someone with great determination and unwavering conviction. The power of their mind is very strong. With strong mental power, no matter whom they face, they are able to overcome and be victorious. The same principle applies to us Buddhist practitioners. For example, two people decide to become monks. One has strong determination, while the other doesn't. The one with greater resolve is willing to endure hardship throughout their practice, and is ready to overcome all adverse conditions and obstacles. As a result, he has a real chance to achieve realization. The same is true for two people who travel to India or the Tibetan regions to study the Dharma, or for those who practice under the guidance of their teacher. Depending on their state of mind, the results they achieve can be quite different. Therefore, I believe each of us should make this resolve in our hearts. From now on, I will do my best to devote this brief life to spiritual practice. I should use the Dharma to transform my own mind stream. This is extremely important. Perhaps in the later part of my life, everything will go smoothly, or perhaps I will encounter various difficulties, obstacles, and hardships. No matter what happens, I must never surrender or yield in the face of afflictions. I must remain steadfast and determined. With this kind of mindset, we are sure to benefit. In the past, when practitioners encountered adversity, their attitude was completely different from ours. For example, there was an elderly monk in my hometown. During the Cultural Revolution, he was publicly denounced. During those struggle sessions, he was ordered to return to lay life. But in the end, he said, "As an old monk, I can give you my life, but I will never take off my monastic robes. Even if it costs me my life, that doesn't matter." Later, because of the beatings and abuse during those sessions, this elderly practitioner passed away. So this shows how he overcame suffering and adversity through the strength of his mind and his practice. Just think, how much benefit does such incredible inner strength bring to one's practice? It goes without saying that with this kind of inner resolve, his level of realization would certainly have increased. We can see this reflected in the Buddhist scriptures, including stories from the life of Buddha Shakyamuni himself. In his previous lives, every time Buddha Shakyamuni encountered attacks from enemies or faced the greatest adversities and afflictions, he would rather give up his body, his possessions, even his life than allow his mind stream to be tainted by afflictions. This is how the Buddha counteracted afflictions. So, some of us here may have had a bad temper in the past and often got angry, quarreling, fighting, or competing with others. But after learning the Dharma, we realized that we should not act in such ways. Later, we made some adjustments in our practice and behavior. So as practitioners, we should make such an aspiration in our hearts. In the future, I can give up anything else, but I must never surrender to afflictions. As Mahayana practitioners, this is a conviction we must always maintain. Next, let's move on to the third topic, which is the joy that arises when afflictions are eliminated. Some of us might think, if afflictions can truly be eliminated, that would be wonderful, but maybe they can't really be eliminated. Even if we do eliminate them, won't they just keep coming back in our mind stream? If that's the case, maybe we'll never have a chance to be free from afflictions. Some people may think this way. But the following verse tells us that afflictions are not like ordinary worldly enemies. Once afflictions are eliminated, they don't have the chance to arise again. Though ordinary enemies, when banished, will stay in other lands, which they adopt to build their power until their return, the enemy affliction is not so. So we really don't need to worry about this. When ordinary enemies are defeated in battle, they may be banished or exiled from a place, but even after being exiled, they can still stay in other lands. Once they regain their strength, they can return and make a comeback. They may even seek revenge or start fighting again. But the enemy of afflictions is not like this. Why? If we use the sword of wisdom to cut off their root, it's like burning a poisonous seed. It will never bear poisonous fruit again. That just won't happen. If we look at history, it's true that worldly enemies are like this. Today, two sides may start fighting, and perhaps one side's power gradually weakens. Then, the weaker side may lose the battle this time. There was a fellow villager of mine who liked to boast. One day, during a fight with someone else, we all saw that he had lost. So some of us said to him, "You always talk so big, but why did you lose today? Why did you lose today?" He replied, "We often fight like this. Sometimes I win, sometimes he wins. Today, I let him win on purpose. So sometimes he might let others win on purpose. But sometimes he wasn't being intentional, he just couldn't win." Looking back through history in the spring and autumn period during the war between the state of Wu and the state of Yue, the king of Yue, Go Jian, was defeated by the king of Wu, Fu Chai, and to save his own life, Go Jian endured Fu Chai's humiliation. For 10 years, he tasted a bit of bitter gall every day, preparing for revenge. Just like one of the young monks here once said, "A gentleman's revenge is never too late, even after 10 years. Maybe this isn't something a young monk should say, but at that time, Gu Jin was truly focused on revenge, to remind himself he slept on straw for years and tasted the bitterness of gall every day. He constantly reminded himself never to forget his revenge. Every day he encouraged himself by sleeping on straw and tasting bitterness. After 10 years, with the help of Xi, one of the 4 great beauties of China, he used her to lure Fu Chai and finally defeated him. So he was able to restore his own country. This shows that if a worldly enemy regains strength, he can return to fight again for revenge once his power is restored. Another historical figure, Chong-er, the prince of the state of Jin, experienced something similar. He was in exile for many years, traveling to the state of Qi, the state of Zheng, and many other places. Sometimes he had nothing but a little thin porridge to eat, and he would add water to the porridge to share it with his followers. After 19 years, he finally returned to his homeland and reclaimed his kingdom. While he was in exile, he tried every way to regain his strength and eventually returned home. It's said that when they crossed the Yellow River, Chong'er threw a jade he used to wear into the river. He threw the jade into the Yellow River to ask Hu Yan to stay. Hu Yan, who was an important attendant, felt that he used to travel everywhere with Chong'er, and along the way he made many mistakes, so he didn't want to go back. To reassure him, Chong'er threw the jade into the river, trying to discourage Hu Yan from leaving. There is such a record in history. So as we can see from history, there have been exiled governments and princes forced out by their enemies. Not long ago, the former Thai Prime Minister Thaksin also fled to the UK UK, situations like this do happen in the world. When the power of your enemies grows strong, they may return and fight against you again. In the end, you may not be able to keep your power at all, but afflictions are completely different from this. How are they different? We can observe this with wisdom. The root of afflictions is inappropriate attention. If inappropriate attention is cut off at the root, then afflictions will never have the chance to arise again. Of course, some teachers nowadays, when giving teaching, say it's not easy to gain absolute assurance through the Dharma. For example, only the 8th Bodhisattva, Bhumi, is called immovable. So bodhisattvas below that, even bodhisattvas of the 7th Bhumi, still face the risk of falling back. Even they can regress from their stages, so you should be careful. Unless these statements are made purposely by those teachers with special reasons, otherwise it doesn't align with the authentic Dharma taught in the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis, the Sutra on the Descent into Lanka, Chandrakirti's Introduction to the Middle Way, and many other Mahayana sutras and treatises, including Maitreya's Ornament of Clear Realization and the Ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. In these texts, it is taught that after attaining the first Bhumi, one will never regress again. One is born into the family of the Tathagatas and has forever severed the 3 fetters. As is taught in the Introduction to the Middle Way, when one attains the first Bodhisattva Bhumi, the 3 fetters, that is, all the view of the transitory composite, doubt and belief in ethical and ritual supremacy, are completely severed. The Ornament of Clear Realization also says that once one attains the stage of acceptance, which is one stage on the path of joining, after attaining this stage, one will never fall into the lower realms. So once you reach the 7th Bodhisattva Bhumi, there is no longer any danger of regressing. If you look at the Mahayana sutras and treatises, has any Bodhisattva of the 7th Bhumi or any Bodhisattva of the 1st Bhumi fallen into the lower realms? Of course, if a Bodhisattva intentionally manifests in the lower realms to benefit beings, then it's another story. In the Ksitigarbha Sutra, Yama's messengers once said, 2 kinds of beings can go to hell. One is ordinary beings with heavy karma who are there to suffer, and the other is bodhisattvas who intentionally manifest there to benefit beings. Other than these 2 types, there are no others in hell. Hell is like a prison. In a prison, there are usually only prisoners and those working there, such as guards, the warden, and other staff. You basically won't find anyone else in prison. Others can hardly go there. Some Dharma friends really want to visit a prison, but it's probably not realistic. It's not open for visiting. Hell is the same way. Beings there are either Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who go there to help beings, or those with very heavy karma who were born there to endure suffering. So once the seeds of afflictions are cut off at the root, is there any way for them to arise again? Absolutely not. Just like the seed of a plant, if it is burned in fire, it can never sprout again. Dharmakirti also used this analogy in his teachings to illustrate that once the seeds of afflictions are uprooted, they will never arise again. In history, many great masters were able to eliminate the cognitive obscurations and emotional obscurations in their mind streams through wisdom so that they never again wandered in samsara. Therefore, it is very important for us to really understand the truths taught in the sutras like this. Without genuine understanding, even if we talk about Buddhist principles all the time, we may still be quite far from the true meaning of the sutras, since it says that after afflictions are cut off, they will never arise again. We should have confidence in this. Afflictions are not the same as other worldly enemies. If I destroy a worldly enemy today, perhaps his descendants or his friends and relatives may attack me when they become powerful. But once afflictions are completely cut off, they will never arise again. This is something we can see from the stories of great masters, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout history. Next, the verse says, "Wretched afflictions cast out by the eye of Prajna, when they are driven from my mind, where can they go? Where can they stay so that they can return to harm me? It's just that I, weak-minded, have not persevered." So how do we actually cut off afflictions? We should use the eye of wisdom to sever them. How do we do this? It means when we antidote afflictions with wisdom, their root simply disappears as it is uprooted. When we examine afflictions with wisdom, we realize there is nowhere for them to go and nowhere for them to abide. If we afflictions have no true nature, nowhere to go or abide, no form or color, how could they possibly come back to harm me? It's simply impossible. The key is that we here just lack diligence. If we had diligence, then each of us would have the opportunity to overcome afflictions. His Holiness also used to say this: if you don't know the pith instructions, it is very difficult to overcome afflictions. But if you know the pith instructions, it is actually very easy to counteract afflictions. It's as easy as turning your hand. We can understand this by looking at the experiences of the Buddha and Shravakas such as Ananda and Shariputra, and Bodhisattvas such as Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and others. Also, there have been countless wise scholars and accomplished masters in history, whether in Tibetan regions, Han regions, or India, and so many yogis and practitioners who relied on their own strength and practice to completely overcome the afflictions in their own mind streams. Ultimately, they attained the fruition of noble beings. As Buddhists, we can find accounts of such stories almost everywhere, so we should also use wisdom to analyze afflictions. When we analyze afflictions with the eye of wisdom on the surface, afflictions may seem very frightening. Some people say, "Cho, what should I do if anger arises in my mind stream?" Or, "I have desire and jealousy arising in my mind. I'm such a bad person." And they become very afraid. But we should apply the pith instructions for overcoming afflictions. If you know the instructions, it's like a skilled butcher. No matter how large the animal, he knows exactly where its vital artery or life force is, so he can end its life with just a single strike at that spot. Many Kadampa masters also held the view that to overcome afflictions, one must either understand the profound instructions of the Sutrayana, such as the view of emptiness, or the instructions of Vajrayana, such as how the nature of afflictions and wisdom are not different. If you understand these instructions, you will see that afflictions are not so formidable. They are just like what we call paper tigers. They may look very frightening and fierce, but in the face of a truly accomplished practitioner with strong perseverance and determination, whose resolve is extremely strong and unwavering, the so-called afflictions become less powerful and easy to overcome. But the key is that many people in the world simply lack diligence. With diligence, there is nothing that cannot be accomplished. In the introduction to the Middle Way, it says, all virtues arise from diligence. With diligence, it's actually not so difficult to overcome the afflictions in our own mind stream. As the saying goes, nothing is difficult if you set your mind to it. No matter how challenging something is in this world, with diligence it can be accomplished. This becomes clear when we read the biographies of great masters. When you look at their lives, they accomplished so many things that seem impossible for ordinary people. They wrote many books and did many things, and they were skilled at overcoming afflictions. We may not see it, but their use of time and the strength of their minds far surpassed our own. So why did these masters have so much time and such realization, while ordinary people like us are still caught in samsara and unable to be as diligent? It all comes down to whether we have adjusted our own minds. If we truly and regularly examine our own mind and learn from the noble ones, we too can become diligent. As mentioned before, for great masters, whether in the past or today, regardless of whether it is day or night, they devote all their time to genuine practice. They are almost never distracted by worldly matters. But for most ordinary people, many of our time is spent on meaningless things: eating, drinking, entertainment, and other pointless activities. Very little time is actually spent on the Dharma. This is the difference between noble beings and ordinary people. Of course, it's not realistic for some practitioners to give up everything, including household chores and other responsibilities. But my hope is that each day you can set aside some time for practice. Don't spend all your time and energy on meaningless things. Otherwise, when death comes, you will definitely regret it. So the key is our diligence. Therefore, if we truly apply the antidotes, afflictions are actually easy to overcome. In some commentaries on the Bodhicaryavatara, it is also said that so-called afflictions are actually referred to in a rather dismissive way. As long as we examine afflictions with wisdom, especially with the wisdom of ultimate truth, they can be cut off instantly. So affliction here is actually a pejorative term. It means that afflictions are fragile and pitiable. When we examine them with wisdom, their true nature cannot be found at all. Although they are a kind of defilement, when examined with the wisdom of selflessness, their nature does not exist at all. So, as practitioners, we should never think, there's nothing I can do now. I'm old, my wisdom is failing, I don't have enough strength, so I have to just go along with the world. I have no courage or strength to overcome afflictions. Never belittle yourself. You should strengthen your confidence. With confidence, you can succeed in anything. If you don't even have confidence in yourself, it's hard to succeed in Dharma practice. So please don't think, I can't memorize texts, so I must not be qualified to study the Dharma. Some people have said, can we listen to the Bodhicharyavatara in private? I don't have the courage to join the Buddhist Study Association. I said, of course, as long as you listen, you can certainly gain some wisdom. But with group study, people can study together, and the power of this is strong. So having an organized group is better, because learning as a group is very powerful. We all know that the results of self-study and studying in school are quite different. It's the same in Buddhism. Through exams, debate, and reflection, the results of learning are very good. I have been engaged in Buddhist education for many years, so I have some understanding of which methods are helpful and which are not. But if you really don't want to study with others, then you can obtain the text online or by other means and study in private. This does not make you a thief or a coward. Instead, this is a sign of your faith in the Dharma. It is a symbol of your confidence. So, I think as long as you gain some benefit for your mind stream, for example, if you now understand or do something you didn't before, that is already an improvement. There is no need to set the bar too high. If you can just do this much, it is already very good. The next verse we will discuss addresses this question. How exactly should we examine afflictions? As just mentioned, afflictions can be eliminated with the eye of wisdom. It's just that we are not diligent enough. So, how should we actually analyze them? The author will now explain that we should examine afflictions from two perspectives: the perspective of ultimate truth and the perspective of conventional truth. Of course, the 9th chapter, the chapter on wisdom, will explain this in detail, including how to eliminate afflictions with the wisdom of ultimate truth and realize the two types of selflessness. When we discuss the chapter on wisdom, I will explain this in detail. Now the verse states, afflictions do not dwell in objects, in the senses or between, nor are they somewhere else. Where do they dwell that harm? All beings. When we investigate and analyze afflictions with the wisdom of emptiness, they simply cannot be found to exist. How is that so? They don't abide in external objects, nor in the sense faculties, nor do they abide in between or anywhere else. So how exactly do afflictions harm us? In fact, afflictions cannot truly harm any sentient being. This is said from the perspective of ultimate truth. Why do we say this? We can investigate for ourselves. For example, when anger or desire arises in our minds, where do they dwell? Do they actually exist in the object, such as an enemy or a loved one? That is not possible. We all know that when you feel anger toward an enemy, do those around you also feel anger toward that person? Not necessarily. If the anger truly existed in the enemy, then anyone who saw them would feel anger. Everyone's mind would give rise to anger. But that is not the case. So afflictions do exist in external objects. The external objects, such as forms, sounds, smells, tastes, that may arouse our desire, anger, and ignorance, don't have the attribute of afflictions. If afflictions are not in external objects, are they in our 6 sense faculties? Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind? Of course not. Both Shravakayana and Mahayana acknowledge that each sentient being possesses sense faculties, but just having them does not necessarily produce afflictions. For example, an arhat has all the faculties, but they have eliminated afflictions. Bodhisattva in meditative absorption don't generate afflictions either. According to some schools, when a person dies, some of their faculties are still working, but a dead person won't have afflictions. So afflictions don't exist in the sense faculties. In this case, are afflictions found in between the faculties and objects. That is also impossible. Between the external enemy and my I faculty, there is only space. This space cannot be the cause of afflictions. If space were the cause of afflictions, then any being moving through space would generate afflictions. Any being moving through space would always generate afflictions, but this is contrary to our experience. It simply does not happen. Apart from the faculties, objects, and the space between. For example, when I feel anger toward an enemy, could anything else outside, like mountains, rivers, or a pillar or a vase, be the cause of afflictions? There is no way these could be the cause of afflictions. So when we analyze with the wisdom of ultimate truth, it is true that afflictions clearly arise in our mind streams, but in reality, they do not truly exist. At this point, some people may wonder, didn't we say earlier that afflictions have always resided in our minds since beginningless time? But now we say that afflictions do not exist anywhere, inside or outside. Isn't this a contradiction? There is no contradiction, because earlier we were speaking from the perspective of conventional truth. From the conventional perspective, afflictions that cause harm exist, and the object being harmed also exists. For example, when anger arises in us, our enemies exist, and we feel this anger. Driven by this anger, we may even do something harmful, such as scold others, hit them with a broom, or even throw stones at them. Some people, if timid, may not dare to fight and just run away. This is also a kind of expression of being influenced by affliction. So, in conventional truth, all of these exist. But when we analyze with the wisdom of ultimate truth, they are definitely not truly existent. Not only are afflictions non-existent at the ultimate level, in fact, all phenomena are like this. As we learn in the introduction to the Middle Way, it is also said, before realization, all three exist. After realization, none exist. After realization, none of the three exist. If you have realized or even attained Buddhahood, then all three factors do not exist. That is to say, the agent, the object, and the action, these three do not truly exist at all. Therefore, we should understand that right now we are dreaming. In the dream, all these exist. But after waking up, nothing exists at all. It's just that we have not yet recognized the nature of mind. When we have not recognized the nature of mind, the root of all afflictions still appears to exist. So some of us might think this way. Afflictions do not exist ultimately, but conventionally they do exist. What is the fundamental reason for this? It is our attachment, our self-grasping that causes it. Although the nature of self-grasping is as insubstantial as clouds or mist, it still appears unmistakably to sentient beings. So, until we recognize the nature of mind, this self-grasping cannot be eliminated. As the fifth patriarch said, if you do not recognize your own mind, studying the Dharma is of no benefit. If we do not recognize the true face of mind, even if we study all 12 categories of texts within the Tripitaka, it is not meaningful. This does not mean there is no merit at all. But the main point is to recognize the nature of mind. Without recognizing the mind's nature, reciting scriptures or chanting for others is just a formality. Jetsun Milarepa also said that some Buddhists and Bon practitioners sing over corpses every day, because in front of others we recite, but we have not tamed our own minds, nor generated compassion for beings. That's why Milarepa said that we are just singing by the corpse. Why did Milarepa use such sarcasm? He was emphasizing that if our mind is truly tamed, then even reciting a single line will bring benefit to sentient beings. Not to mention realization, even with a calm mind, we will gain some benefit from it. Yesterday, many Dharma friends felt that when their minds became calm, they could make confession effectively. When the mind is settled, they can recall past negative actions or reflect on why they make no progress in practice. Especially when we are alone, it's a good time to reflect on what teachings we have learned here and how it has benefited us. And we will realize, I shouldn't be swayed by afflictions. When our minds are calm, many of our faults become clear. So do our compassion and faith. Sometimes when we pray to the Guru together with others, our faith might not feel so genuine. But when we sit alone and reflect, our faith can naturally arise. Therefore, we need to have some recognition of the nature of mind. With that recognition, whatever we do has real power. Otherwise, even if we recite mantras while walking, there is merit, but it's much less. Previously, I encouraged you to carry malas and prayer wheels with you. This can be something that sets Buddhists apart from ordinary people, a sign of being a Buddhist. But it is often when the mind is calm that the Dharma works best for us. Some people might think, well, in that case, I'll start a retreat tomorrow and see if my mind calms down. But for these people, it's possible that they can't stay in retreat and want to come out. Some people here in retreat have this kind of situation. Our discursive mind is just like a naughty child. If you want it to be active, it may not want to. If you want it to be still, it may want to be distracted again. So in conventional terms, our mind has these faults. But overall, when we examine our own mind by using the wisdom of the ultimate truth or the pith instructions of secret mantra as taught by masters, in that very moment, all afflictions can be completely eliminated. But this does not mean the seeds of afflictions are cut off yet. At the stage of an ordinary person, we may only suppress afflictions. If we continue to investigate, then through the power of practice, we can cut off the root of afflictions and they will never arise again. From then on, we will never generate afflictions. In any case, we should sometimes investigate afflictions with the wisdom of ultimate truth and sometimes analyze with the reasoning that conventionally, everything is like a dream and illusion. The next verse examines afflictions from the perspective of conventional truth. They're like illusions. Rid your heart of fear and apply diligence for the sake of prajna. Why let them torment you pointlessly in hell? From the perspective of ultimate truth, even the illusory appearance of afflictions cannot be found. We will discuss this profound meaning further in the future, especially when we reach the chapter on wisdom. This verse says that the so-called afflictions are like the illusory elephant conjured by a magician. So, as practitioners, there is no need to be afraid of afflictions. In order to cut off afflictions in our mind streams, we should apply diligence in order to develop the wisdom of non-self. If we diligently practice for the sake of wisdom, how could afflictions possibly torment us pointlessly in hell? It is simply impossible, only that we are not diligent right now. If we truly apply diligence, we certainly can avoid that kind of suffering. Just like in prison, if someone's crime is not too severe, as long as they perform well, they have a chance to get out. It is the same for us. With a sincere effort, by relying on Madhyamaka and the wisdom of emptiness, anyone can eliminate afflictions. So I think that for many of you, compared to those who have never studied the Dharma, it is much easier for you to overcome afflictions because you know the methods and have at least heard some teachings on Madhyamaka and emptiness. So you know that even though desire and anger often arise in your mind streams, the force of these afflictions is as weak as a gentle spring breeze. For someone who has never studied the Dharma or worked to overcome afflictions, their afflictions can be very strong or intense. Sometimes we can see that when someone who has never trained in compassion gets angry, no matter how hard people try to pacify their anger, they just can't. When their desire arises, no one can stop it either. But for practitioners, even though some afflictions arise in their mind streams, they know these are just illusory appearances. All that has form is illusory, as it is taught in the Diamond Sutra. All conditioned phenomena are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows. Although things appear like a dream or a bubble, when you truly investigate them, the very nature of these afflictions collapses instantly. Just like some of the artificial frameworks in the world, as soon as the support is gone, the whole thing collapses. We should understand affliction like this from the conventional perspective. From the ultimate perspective, everything is empty, free from all elaborations. The so-called afflictions simply don't exist. inside and out. And from the conventional perspective, although afflictions appear like illusions, like dreams, like mirages, like reflections on water, they appear frequently, but when they do, as soon as you examine and analyze them with the eye of wisdom, they naturally vanish without a trace. Although my own practice is not good, we all understand how to investigate afflictions. When anger arises, you can search inside and out for the anger, and at that point you may realize the ultimate state where nothing can be found, only a luminous empty state. At that time, the state of ultimate truth can arise in your mind, or you understand that although afflictions have an illusory appearance, but this illusion can neither afflict harmful nor bring benefit to us. This is one way to investigate afflictions from the conventional perspective. Sometimes we may feel that our practice is not making progress, but sometimes it is okay. Compared to others, we should have hope for overcoming our own afflictions. Right now, we may not be able to realize that afflictions are just like dreams and illusions, and they are truly neither harmful nor beneficial, just like our lineage masters did. But as long as we have some understanding of the nature of afflictions, I think this is already very good. Yesterday, there was someone who really wanted to become a monastic. She felt that everything in this world was meaningless. But as Patrul Rinpoche said, occasional renunciation is not so reliable, and it is important to pray often. Still, to give rise to such renunciation is very good. She wanted to take ordination as soon as possible. So I asked her, do you have a family? She said, yes, I have a father, a mother, a husband, and so on. So she has a big family. This probably means she has a husband, children, and both parents. In any case, her family is very big. But she felt that everything at home was meaningless. This can also suggest that she has understood that afflictions are apparent but not real. Some time ago, I encountered a person from my hometown. When I talked to him, it was helpful for my own mind. I don't have any higher realization, but by observing those experienced in their practice, I can learn something from them, although my own practice is not very good. That person said to me, today I went back to our hometown to attend a wedding ceremony. So I asked, how was it? He said, not much, really. The couple felt very happy, but I already know what kind of suffering they will face. So I had no interest at all. I just had to attend it according to the worldly tradition. From his words, you could sense a deep feeling of renunciation in his heart. I think many of us, whether monastics or lay people, when we see the illusory appearances of the world, whether it is others' happiness or suffering, whether others are afflicted or liberated, we should view them as a dream or illusion. Toward this world, just like Patrul Rinpoche's teacher did, we should neither envy nor reject it. It's just that, as says in Buddhist logic, these appearances cannot be refuted, that's all. In reality, all of this is false. When you have this kind of realization, it is a sign that you are not so attached to illusory afflictions. The main thing is when our minds are not attached to external things, the afflictions in our own mind streams will naturally decrease and eventually disappear. So all of the above mainly explains the meaning of carefulness. In fact, the Buddha said in the Inconceivable Sutra that carefulness means taming one's own mind and protecting the minds of others, not giving rise to afflictions, but cherishing performing virtues, refraining from generating thoughts of desire, anger, competition, or inappropriate attention, and never engaging in unwholesome actions. This is what is called carefulness. There are such passages in the sutra. Here, it is summarized what carefulness really means. That is, in our daily life, we should always adjust our mind streams and not give rise to afflictions. This is one aspect. The second is that we should protect the minds of others. When His Holiness was about to pass away, he told everyone, do not harm sentient beings. Always tame your own mind and do not disturb the minds of others. This was his final instruction. So, as practitioners, we should never disturb the minds of others. This is extremely important, and we should always strive to overcome afflictions, to free our own minds from the net of afflictions. When we really cannot overcome them, then it's important to feel ashamed and make confessions. All of the above has been explained regarding the faults of afflictions. Now comes the summary. The summary is to conclude the main teaching of this chapter. I've contemplated thus, and now will strive to undertake the precepts as described. How can a patient who needs medicine be cured if they ignore the doctor's advice? Here it summarizes all the points about carefulness discussed earlier. In the first chapter, we studied the benefits of bodhicitta. In the second and third chapters, we discussed taking hold of bodhicitta. The fourth chapter explained that after taking the bodhisattva vow, we must not break it carelessly. We must be very careful and protect the Bodhisattva vow. So it discusses the principle of carefulness. But these trainings are not just for us to understand on a literal or verbal level. We must put them into practice. What does it mean to practice? For every training and every action, we should reflect on them often. Even if you do not understand a lot of knowledge, as long as you understand the basic trainings of the Bodhisattva path, you will gain immeasurable benefit in your future practice. Sometimes I am very grateful to His Holiness. By teaching the 100 deeds to us, we generate aware toward karma and its effects. Through Buddhist logic, we understood that Buddha Shakyamuni is truly a reliable teacher, and that everything he taught is absolutely true. After teaching us the Bodhicharyavatara, we understood the benefits of bodhicitta. As Mahayana practitioners, bodhicitta is essential to us after teaching the words of my perfect teacher. We learned that Buddhist practitioners must establish a solid foundation. Later, after teaching Lama Yangtik and other tantric teachings, we understood that by praying to the Guru, we will eventually realize the nature of mind. So, His Holiness taught us many pith instructions. Some people say it's useless to teach so much, just one teaching is enough. But for us ordinary people who may not possess sharp capacity, it is better to listen to more teachings. Even though there are many words contained in a teaching, when you summarize them, there is a clear focus. And it is very helpful and effective for your own mind stream. So first, everyone should study widely and learn extensively. This is very important. There is no need to think, now that I've taken refuge, that's enough. Actually, we may not really understand the refuge vows or renunciation. So without wide learning, it is not enough. But when we study widely, it should not just be on a superficial level. No matter how much you say, if you do not put it into practice, it is meaningless. The Buddha taught in the sutras, a fool recites 1,000 verses, but does not understand a single line. Even if a fool recites 1,000 verses, he cannot explain the meaning of even one. A wise person recites one verse and understands 100,000 meanings. Even if a wise person recites just one verse, he understands the profound meanings of numerous verses. So, I think that after we understand these meanings, it is very important to put them into practice in our daily lives. If we do not practice, it is like the worldly analogy. For example, someone with a very serious illness. With much difficulty, he finds a doctor, and after diagnosed, the doctor prescribes medicine. He then gets the medicine, but does not take any of it, and just throws it all away. Will this help his illness? Of course not. In the King of Samadhi Sutra, the Buddha also used this analogy to illustrate this point. For example, a pitiful patient who has been sick for a long time tries every possible way to find a good doctor, and after finding one, he sincerely asks for treatment, and the doctor treats him with compassion. But if the patient never takes the medicine, then it is of no use to the patient. In the same way, with the Buddha's teachings, if monastics and practitioners do engage in proper practice, the teachings will not benefit them at all. This is what the Buddha taught in that sutra. And in the Sutra of Exhorting Supreme Intention, the Buddha also said, I have taught the sublime Dharma, but if you hear it and do not practice, it is like a patient who does not take his medicine. I cannot save him. So the Buddha said, if you do not practice what I taught, it is just like a patient who does not take his medicine. Therefore, it will be difficult if we practice every teaching we have learned one by one, but we must not remain merely on the academic level, treating Buddhism only as a kind of worldly knowledge. And we have no real faith in the three jewels. Even if we have a little faith, we have no fear of future lives or the law of cause and effect. Such behavior is truly horrible. Therefore, when we receive teachings from a teacher, we should try to absorb them. Of course, we have only studied the first 4 chapters of the Bodhicharyavatara so far, and have not yet covered much of the whole text. But I've heard that some people have gained some benefit from receiving this teaching. those who previously knew nothing about the Dharma now understand a little, and those who did not know the importance of bodhicitta now understand a bit. This is the effect of the Dharma. So I hope that everyone here will not just listen to the words and let it pass by. That is not very useful. We should always carefully contemplate the Dharma we have heard on how to overcome afflictions. Personally, sometimes when I calm my mind, I feel very ashamed. If I use the knowledge I have learned over more than 20 years to counteract afflictions, it will definitely have had some effect. But I spent much of the time on Buddhist research, translation, and other activities. So if I were to die today or tomorrow, I have no real confidence at all. So I would have such a feeling in my heart. But sometimes I think over all these years, I have at least tried to maintain a good heart. I can't say it is bodhicitta, but I have had a good intention. And I have not wasted much time. Looking back, I do feel this way. Some of our Dharma friends here have not studied for very long. You may have spent much time cultivating worldly habits before you take up Buddhism. A lot of time has been spent on that. And that habitual pattern can also be very powerful. You may have spent a lot of energy and effort on worldly matters. But how much time have you spent on the Dharma? And when you do, how focused is your mind? So when you reflect in this way, you may find that your practice is not very satisfactory. This is why we say that every morning we should spend at least half an hour observing our own mind in meditation. Only talk about the definitions and characteristics of Buddhist terms doesn't help. Nor does only practice without theoretical basis. So theory and practice must be combined. Worldly education also says that theory and practice must go together. In Buddhism, we must combine theory and practice as well. Just like a patient obtains many kinds of medicine and knows the names of all the medicines, but he never takes them, he can never be cured. In the same way, every bit of wisdom within Buddhism can counteract our afflictions. But if we never get used to applying it in our practice and think that it's enough to only know the words, in that case, it will absolutely not help our mind streams. Therefore, we should observe our minds with the teachings we receive and keep working to counteract afflictions. In time, we will definitely achieve realization and see results. This is the Vajra speech of the Buddha, not just the speculation of ordinary people. If it were not helpful, there would be no point in promoting the Dharma. In encouraging you to apply the Dharma, I have no intention of self-promotion just for you to benefit from it. But why do we always say that the Dharma is so supreme? It is because for each of us, Buddhism can solve our problems in this and future lives. Also, our inner happiness and well-being is all enhanced through the blessings and wisdom of Buddhism. That's why. Therefore, everyone should practice the unique and supreme teachings of Buddhism. It is useless to just talk about them. All right, we will stop here for today. Now, we have finished explaining the 4th chapter.
Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye